First, I'd like to acknowledge the Kaurna people of the land that we stand upon today. My people are from Yupungathi and Meriam, Cape York and the Torres Strait, so I'm a long way from home. I want to open this afternoon with a piece from one of my poems, and then I will go into discussing what I do. I'm a social epidemiologist in medicine, and I mix it together with the arts through poetry. And so here we go. Still, we rise as black women do, culturally bonded, spiritually empowered, strength and resilience valuable tools, with integrity and generational humbleness. We are the drivers, backbone, visionaries, feelers, healers, leaders, prophetics, with degrees in silenceness. And we need to have those degrees in silenceness, because we are only 3% of the entire Australian population as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And of that 3%, 50% are under the age of 22. And when you think about that, then you sort of understand that it's not just about being 3%. 50% is a very small population group. And with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women between the age of 22 and 24 are 5 times more likely to commit suicide. These are really sad and damaging statistics. And when you understand that not only do we have to go through the layers of these statistics and data, and we live and breathe that statistic every day, we also have to deal with things like racism. A recent study by the ABS in the NATSIS report on 10,000 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people identified 49% as experiencing extreme racism and 88% experiencing extreme psychological disorder. Alarming data, and yet we still see defunding of services. In 2015, we saw $830 million defunded out of population health services. Population health is preventative health. So it's things like sexual health, health promotion. Those pieces come together and help address the cause of an issue. And when we address the cause of an issue as a population, we give people self-determination. Now, I want to read to you a covenant that Australia signed to in 1966. And when Australia signed to this covenant, it's the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, 1966. And when Australia signed to this covenant, they signed to giving people self-determination. It states that all people have the right of self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. Culture. What is your culture? How do you express your culture? When funding is removed from the arts and culture, that affects each and every one of us. And for us as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, that affects us on a whole different level as Indigenous people, because a lot of our expression is through the arts and culture. So we start seeing this increase in incarceration. We start seeing this increase in suicide. We start seeing an increase in domestic and family violence, and the list goes on. And it can be quite saddening. And sometimes you have to stand back and wonder, well, what are people doing? As black women, we've had these opportunities, but we haven't had the opportunities as other women in this country. Only 4.6% of Indigenous people have an undergraduate degree, compared to 55% of non-Indigenous people. And I'd like to say, it's the actual cause of that is because people don't have the opportunity. There is layer upon layer of policy imposed on Aboriginal and Torres Strait people. We see the inequality. We see in one hand where it's offered out, and in the other it's taken just as quick. So the layers of trauma on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people over the last 5 years has increased. We had, prior to colonisation, it was survival from the elements. At colonisation, it was survival from people that hated us because of the colour of our skin. Then another layer came, surviving policies, inequitable policies. And then another layer has come. Those policies are now being repeated. They're not being addressed in the system. So we're seeing that again. And as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, we see that the failure in the system. Now, what does this have to do with the arts and culture and theatre? Well, the defunding across the board has actually brought about the expression through the arts to explain to people what is going on, how are we feeling about it. I'm going to read to you one of my poems. And I wrote this poem for the for NAISDA's 40th last year. And so we did a performance for it. It's called Warrior Cloak. At colonisation invasion, we stood together as one, fought for the land, our country, with a belief our men and women would rise above their hate to breathe a freedom sigh of relief. As warriors of our culture, we defended our children, homelands, traditions, endured abuse and rapes, from people of colonial convicts, declaring only way for Aborigines is to assimilate. Old ways of the ancestors is kindness and equality. Only take what you need. Hold the land in trust. It is our silent deed, adorning our warrior cloaks as realisation of Western system, segregation, individualism, and respect to women is via humiliation. Winning the stripes by putting on suits, promising to empower, instead lies and dishonesty recruit, following colonised women's advice, cultural knowledge via alcohol-induced bedroom does not suffice. United, standing tall, pulling on our warrior cloaks. History's cycle continues. We connect, embrace for the fall, fighting to stop continued cultural degradation, removal of our children, control of income, increased suicides, incarceration, limited access to services, examples of negative connotation in no language equals initiation. Suit is power for what? Deceit, lies, murder, rapes, theft, money, all for saving the economy. And still we stand in our warrior cloak, ancestors watching through window eyes. Our decisions now worth nothing, promoting inequality. Your selfishness is crushing. Look and see damage created from signatories. Hear our people's plea. Commence your reality check from the outside in. For our warrior cloaks have now become our skin, and with or without you, we will protect our kin. I wrote that poem as one of the first pieces of art that I did, that I could bring my work into the art and theatre space for expression. And as a social epidemiologist, I look at the cause of the burden of disease and what causes people to want to commit suicide. Or what does it mean to experience domestic and family violence? What is the cause of such high homicide rates for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, in particular women? And so when I wrote that poem, I wrote it out at a place where I was so angry with people who wore suits. So angry because they've had a chance. And those bastards haven't made a difference. 240 years. The incarceration is out of control. We have one of the highest suicides in the world. The only country that beats us in incarceration is America, the African American population. There's nothing to be proud of. It's a shame as a country. And so that's what I do. I bring it all together and I use my poetry to express what the policies are doing to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Because those policies don't just affect us, they affect each and every one of you. You know, I teach on a Friday and I said to my students, I said, in Western Australia, a young Aboriginal boy was run over, was killed. He was on his own motorbike, he was killed. And the killer never went to jail. And I said to my students, and I work at the University of Sydney, and I teach there on a Friday, and I said to my students, do you want to go to Western Australia? How does that make you feel? My students sat there and put their heads down in shame. If anything, people need to understand what they're doing to the next generation, because it's the next generation that are committing suicide. They sat there and they said, I don't want to go to Western Australia. That is so wrong. If we don't change the system, our young people will die. That's it. Thank you.